Hello, I'm R.A. Spratt, and I want to welcome people joining us this week on the Yoto podcast platform. Now, just so you know, most of the bedtime stories I tell here are standalone stories. But over the last year, we have been dipping in and out of the epic story of Odysseus, the hero from ancient Greek mythology. And this week, I'm going to be telling the second last installment of that tale. So if you can jump in right here, that'll be fine. I'm sure you'll pick it all up. But if you did want to go back to the beginning and start from the first episode, you can search back through the episodes. The first episode's called Odysseus, as told by Nanny Piggins, and it dropped on January 8th, 2025. Or you can go back and listen to any of the other episodes. You're going to find fairy tales, myths, legends, and mysteries. I hope you enjoy them all. Now let's get into it. Hello and welcome to Bedtime Stories with me, R.A. Spratt. Well, I'm back home here in beautiful Bowral after my week in Singapore last week. Very hectic week in Singapore. I listened back to the recording I did last week. I was talking very quickly. There was a lot going on that week. I think I was just desperately trying to finish the story before the ruckus started up again in the hotel. Anyway, so having returned from Singapore, you might be thinking, oh, maybe she'll have a Singaporean story for us this week. And I don't. I did get a couple of cool Chinese stories from a Grab driver over there. Grab is like the Singaporean equivalent to Uber. And she had some great stories. So I hope to do those eventually. I've got to research them all a bit more. But the story I'm going to do today, I got from my sister-in-law. So my brother's wife is Korean Australian, so she speaks Korean, and my nephews, they learn Korean too, and they speak Korean at home. So she had this Korean folktale book for children where the print was half in English and half in Korean, and it had some really cool stories that I hadn't heard before. So I picked out two that I thought were particularly good for the podcast, and I'm going to do one of them today. All right. I think that's all you need to know. There's just one thing in terms of dialect and the difference between Australian and American dialect. I'm going to be talking a lot about a jumper and a lost jumper. And hang on a second. Sorry, I just had to let the dog in. He doesn't like being outside when I'm talking to myself, in case I'm talking to someone really interesting, like another dog, I guess. Anyway, he's in now. Are you going to go sit down? Yeah. He'll sit down in a sec. All right. So what was I saying? A jumper. So in America, you call them a sweater. So a jumper is a knitted sweater, usually knitted from wool. And in Australia, kids all have to wear school uniforms, like the vast majority do anyway. So it's an issue, your school uniform, and losing it, because it's not like you'd have something the same. It's a pain if you lose your school jumper. Anyway, that's all you need to know to understand this story. All right. Let's get into it. The other thing I should say before I start is, you may think, oh, what's that noise in the background? It sounds like it's raining. Yes, it is raining. But I've left it a bit late, and I've got to go to the dentist tomorrow with the girls. So I've got no choice. We have to record this now. And the rain has eased up. I actually have recorded the first 5 minutes of this podcast already and had to stop because a thunderstorm came through. So we're going to persevere with the rain because that's a steady noise. Okay, that's all you need to know. Let's do it. All right. Today's story is... That's some thunder there. Let's just give it a go, see how we go. Today's story is The Woodcutter and the Heavenly Nymph, as told by Nanny Piggins. How was school today? Asked Nanny Piggins when Derek, Samantha and Michael returned from a long, arduous day of compulsory education. Pretty good, said Derek. Okay, said Michael. Mostly fine, said Samantha, except I lost my jumper. You lost your jumper? Exclaimed Nanny Piggins in immediate distress. It's okay, said Samantha. It's probably in lost property. I'll check first thing when I go to school in the morning. Oh, I hope you're right, said Nanny Piggins. Can we go straight down to school right now and check? But the school will be shut, said Derek. I don't mind breaking in, said Nanny Piggins. I do have my old jumper, said Samantha. It's a little small, but I can wear that until I find the new one. That's not the point of the matter, said Nanny Piggins. If I was concerned about you being cold, I would merely keep you home from school, wrap you up in a doona and feed you warm doughnuts and hot chocolate all day. If it's the cost of replacing the jumper, said Samantha, I could get a part-time job. I'm sorry, I know Father doesn't like paying for new clothes. Oh, it's not that, said Nanny Piggins. It would be no trouble at all coming up with a money-making scheme to earn the price of a jumper. I could simply bake a cake and swap it for a jumper with one of the ladies at the uniform shop. No, the hard part would be fighting off all the other ladies who would desperately want to bite. No, my concern with you losing your jumper is, what if it isn't lost? What if it's stolen? Well, that would be odd, said Samantha. But if someone's so cold and they can't afford a jumper, I don't mind if they borrow mine. No, I mean, what if they stole it because you are a heavenly nymph, said Nanny Piggins. Huh? Said Samantha. That happened to a dear relative of mine once, said Nanny Piggins. It was a nightmare. Oh, this sounds like a good one, said Michael gleefully. You'd better tell us the whole story, Nanny Piggins, said Derek. Then I'd better make some yakwa, said Nanny Piggins, because this is a story from the Olden Korean story days, so we will need appropriate snacks. Half an hour later, they were gathered around the kitchen table eating yakwa, which Michael was relieved to discover contained no yaks, but instead honey and ginger. Boris had eaten several dozen already and was lying in a honeycomb on the floor, so Nanny Piggins could begin her tale. My story begins in the Olden Korean story days, said Nanny Piggins. There was a woodcutter who lived and worked in the forest at the foot of a great tall mountain. Was he evil? Asked Michael. Not really, said Nanny Piggins. No more than the next person. We can all be a bit evil sometimes, can't we? I know my own morality does slip in the presence of a truck from the Slimbridge cake factory. The Slimbridge cake factory had had to adjust the route their trucks took because if they travelled within 2 miles of the greenhouse, Nanny Piggins would smell them, then chase down the truck and hijack it. She knew it was wrong, but she couldn't help herself. It's just that if he is a woodcutter, that means he cuts down trees. And cutting down trees isn't nice, said Michael. True, said Nanny Piggins, but this was the olden story days, before electricity had been invented yet. So woodcutters were essential. Without wood, there would be no ovens. And without ovens, there would be no cookies, like the 3 you've got shoved in your mouth right now. Michael nodded because he did indeed have 3 cookies in his mouth and therefore could not speak. So the woodcutter was toiling away in the forest, chopping down trees and wrestling with his conscience about his profession, said Nanny Piggins, when a deer ran into the clearing where he was standing, and the deer looked distressed. Are you all right? Asked the woodcutter. No, said the deer. The hunter is coming. He's trying to shoot me with his bow and arrow. I've been running all morning trying to get away from him. Now, the woodcutter had a large pile of chopped wood nearby. Well, why don't you hide behind my woodpile? Suggested the woodcutter. Oh, thank you, said the deer. I'm so tired. The deer hid behind the woodpile, and the woodcutter went back to work. A short time later, the hunter galloped into the clearing on his horse. You there! Did you see a deer pass this way? Demanded the hunter. No, said the woodcutter, which was actually honest because she had not passed that way. So the hunter charged off into the forest looking for the deer. When he was safely gone, the deer crept out of her hiding place. Oh, thank you so much! You saved my life, said the deer. I'd like to thank you by doing you a favour in return. Is there anything you want? Me? Oh, no, said the woodcutter. I have a good life. I have a nice house at the edge of the forest. There is plenty of wood for me to cut and sell, so I have plenty to eat and support myself. You must want something, said the deer. Well, I will admit, said the woodcutter, sometimes I am a little lonely. I wish I had a wife to share my good fortune and keep me company. Then I can help. I know where you can get a wife, said the deer. Oh, where? Asked the woodcutter. At the top of this mountain, said the deer. I will give you instructions on how to find her and exactly what to do. So the woodcutter leaned in close to the deer and she whispered some instructions. Now, climbing the mountain took the woodcutter many hours, but the idea of finding a wife was so precious to him that he kept on going. Eventually, after a long, hard climb, as he drew near the top, he heard the sound of women laughing. He realized the deer had been right. There were women here at the top of the mountain. The woodcutter crept towards the sound. He looked through the bushes and saw a beautiful pool of water with a waterfall and water lilies and all the beautiful things you can imagine. And most beautiful of all, bathing in the pool were 8 staggeringly beautiful heavenly nymphs. "Nymphs!" exclaimed Michael, "like the ones in Greek myths?" "Well, I don't know," said Nanny Piggins. "I wasn't around in the ancient Greek story days or the Olden Korean story days, so I can't compare and contrast. But it's not like they had passports back then, and it's not like nymphs follow protocol anyway. They're heavenly. They can travel about using heavenly powers. So it should be no surprise that they were international jet-setters popping up in different countries." "Fair enough," said Derek. "Now, all these nymphs were staggeringly beautiful," said Nanny Piggins. Michael gasped. "Oh! Because they were related to you?" "Of course. They were indeed all Pigginses," said Nanny Piggins immodestly. "But one of the nymphs, my great-great-great times 125 great's cousin, Hanul Piggins, caught the woodcutter's eye." "Because he liked her personality?" asked Samantha. "Well, at first he was drawn to the delicious yakgwa cookie she was holding in her hand," said Nanny Piggins. "Yum," said Boris. "But once Hanul ate that, the woodcutter also noticed that she had beautiful eyes, and in them he could see that she had an even more beautiful soul. So he fell instantly in love with her." "Your relatives often have that effect on men," said Derek. "I know, it's a burden," said Nanny Piggins. "It's probably why they hid behind a bush at the top of an impossibly high mountain to take a bath." The woodcutter desperately wanted to marry Hanul, so he followed the deer's further instructions. Now, the heavenly nymphs had left their celestial robes hanging on a nearby bush. "What's a celestial robe?" asked Michael. "I'm not sure exactly. I know it's what all the gods and nymphs wore up in heaven," said Nanny Piggins, "so it must have been super stylish and very comfortable." "You mean like your hot pink wrestling leotard?" asked Michael. "Probably," said Nanny Piggins. Anyway, the woodcutter snuck over and stole Hanul's celestial robe. "Oh, that's a bit creepy," said Derek. "And how did he know which was her robe?" asked Samantha. "Stop applying logic and 21st century values to my story," said Nanny Piggins. "If you want to hear the story, hold your questions for the end." The children fell silent. They might think the story was morally ambiguous, but that didn't mean they didn't want to know what happened next. The other heavenly nymphs put on their robes and flew up to the heavens, but the one nymph couldn't find her robes, and without her robes she couldn't return to heaven. "Oh no, what am I to do?" said Hanul. "Excuse me," said the woodcutter, with his hands over his eyes to protect her modesty. "I can't help but notice that you're having a spot of difficulty." "Yeah, because he caused it," heckled Samantha. "If you can't return to heaven, you are most welcome to come to my house and marry me and make me the happiest man alive," said the woodcutter. "Why would I marry you?" asked Hanul. "I've just lost my clothes, not my senses. Being naked and homeless does not mean I have to accept the first marriage proposal I'm offered." "Oh, no, of course not," said the woodcutter. How about you put on my coat and come and stay at my house? I'll sleep outside in the garden while you figure out what you want to do with your life, now that you can no longer return to the heavens." "I don't know," said Hanul. "I'm too hungry to make major life decisions. It's dinner time, and I haven't had a snack for hours." "Oh no, that is bad. I've got some delicious yakwa cookies if you'd like something to eat while you think about it," offered the woodcutter. He gave Hanul a cookie, and as soon as she sank her teeth in, it was love at first bite. "She fell in love with the woodcutter?" asked Samantha. "No, she fell in love with the yakwa cookie," said Nanny Piggins. "But the woodcutter had made the cookie, and when she went back with him to his house and he made her another 10 dozen more, then she did fall in love with him, agreed to marry him, and they were happily married." "So it ended happily ever after?" said Samantha. "Well, yes, at first," said Nanny Piggins. "The woodcutter cut wood, Hanul ate the cookies. It was a dream marriage. But then they had a baby." "Well, what's wrong with babies?" asked Michael. Being the youngest, he was the most sensitive to this issue because he had most recently been a baby himself. "Nothing. Hanul and the woodcutter loved their baby. It was a beautiful, happy, healthy, giggly baby that brought them both great joy." But the thing about having a beautiful baby is new parents have a primal urge to show their baby off to their families. But Hanul couldn't do that because she didn't have her celestial robes anymore. And her mother lived up in the heavens, and her mother was the one she most wanted to show off her baby to. So she became very, very sad. There was a lot of sighing and some crying. And seeing Hanul sad made the woodcutter sad. "Well, it was all his fault," said Samantha. "Yes, and that only made him feel sadder, because guilt is a horrible type of sadness that wheedles its way deep into your heart and ruins whatever joy you may have." The woodcutter loved Hanul and their baby so much he couldn't bear to be parted from them, so he decided he would live with the guilt and keep his mouth shut about the robe. But then, a couple of years later, they had another baby, who was also beautiful and lovely and giggly. Both parents loved him dearly, but again, Hanul felt sad that she couldn't show off her baby to her family in heaven. And now the woodcutter felt even guiltier, because his love for his wife had grown every day that they were married, and he'd loved her a mind-blown amount to start with. So seeing how sad she was now made him feel horrible, and he cracked. "His head open?" asked Michael. "No, his conscience cracked," said Nanny Piggins. The woodcutter couldn't keep the secret any more. He took out the celestial robes from where he'd hidden them and took them to his wife. "What's this?" she asked when he handed her the package. "Please forgive me," begged the woodcutter. Hanul tore open the package. "My celestial robe! You found it!" But the woodcutter could no longer live with his lie. "No, I stole it because I fell in love with you and I wanted to marry you," he confessed. "If you loved me, how could you do that to me?" demanded Hanul. "A deer told me to do it," admitted the woodcutter. "A deer?" "Yes, a doe, a deer, a female deer," said the woodcutter. "Right, that's it. I'm going to see my mother," said Hanul. She picked up the children, put on her robe, and immediately started ascending into the sky. The woodcutter was devastated. "Yeah, but he totally had it coming," said Samantha. "Oh, he knew that," said Nanny Piggins, and the shame made him feel even worse. But what Hanul didn't realise was that since she'd been stuck down on earth, her mother up in heaven had instituted a new rule. None of the heavenly nymphs were allowed to go down to earth any more. Hanul had been planning to visit her mother, then go back the same day. But once she got up into heaven, she couldn't return. She was stuck in heaven. "Oh dear," said Michael. The woodcutter was devastated. He cried so hard he couldn't see the trees clearly enough to cut them down. So he'd just wander about the forest every day with his axe, weeping. "Not even taking a break for a delicious yakwa biscuit?" asked Boris. "Yes, he was even too sad to eat yakwa biscuits," said Nanny Piggins. "Oh, the tragedy," said Boris. One day, when he was wandering in this distraught fashion, the deer came bounding into the clearing where he was weeping. "Oh, my friend, what is wrong now?" asked the deer. The woodcutter sobbed even harder as he told the deer his tale. "Oh, I'm so sorry," said the deer. "But don't worry, I can help you." And the deer whispered some instructions in his ear. "Not again," said Samantha. The deer told the woodcutter to climb the great mountain, return to the beautiful pool, and wait until twilight. The woodcutter did as he was told. He sat weeping next to the pool, and as darkness fell, something else fell. A bucket on a rope was lowered down from the heavens. "A bucket," said Derek. "Yes, you see, they don't have taps or plumbing in heaven, so they have to get their drinking water somehow." The bucket dipped down into the pool, captured a whole load of water, then started to go back up to the heavens. And the woodcutter did what the deer had instructed. He jumped onto the bucket, so he was pulled up too, through the sky, through the clouds, and into the realm of the gods, the heavens themselves. And as soon as he emerged into the heavens, he was hugged by his wife, asked Derek. No, bashed about the head with a rolling pin by his mother-in-law, the mother goddess, said Nanny Piggins. A rolling pin, said Samantha. Yes, said Nanny Piggins. Why did the mother goddess have a rolling pin, asked Samantha. Did she do baking too? No, the mother goddess had 8 staggeringly beautiful daughters who were all heavenly nymphs. And pigs and distant relatives of yours, added Michael. Exactly, said Nanny Piggins. So men were forever falling in love with them. So their mother carried a rolling pin at all times, just in case she had to bop a love-crazed suitor on the head, which she did have to do quite a lot, let me tell you. "How dare you steal my daughter's celestial robe, you naughty, naughty woodcutter," accused the mother goddess. "I'm so sorry, mother goddess," said the woodcutter, "but she was just so beautiful. I fell deeply in love and desperately wanted to share my life with her." "Oh, husband, it's you!" cried Hanul. She'd heard her mother bop someone on the head with a rolling pin and guessed her husband had come to visit. "Oh, Hanul, how I have missed you. Please forgive me," begged the woodcutter. "Oh, we've missed you too," said Hanul. "Yakwa!" exclaimed the children. "Yes, and we've missed your delicious yakwa cookies too," added Hanul. "Mother, may we return to Earth so we can be together as a family again?" "You are prepared to sacrifice your heavenly life for this man and his cookies?" asked the mother goddess. "Yes, he is a good man," said Hanul, "and they are really good cookies." "Would you like to try one?" asked the woodcutter. "I couldn't eat my lunch because I was so grief-stricken." He offered one of the yakwa cookies to the mother goddess, and as soon as she tried it, his fate was sealed. The mother goddess allowed the woodcutter to stay in heaven. "So he could be with his family forever?" asked Michael. "Well, yes, but mainly so he could bake her cookies forever, which just goes to show what a sensible goddess she was. The end. Time for bed." "But it's only 4 o'clock in the afternoon," Derek reminded Nanny Piggins. "Oh, yes, so it is. And Samantha has lost her jumper," said Nanny Piggins. "Well, you can see now why I was so concerned, given my family's history." "Because you thought someone had stolen my jumper so I couldn't ascend to heaven and I'd have to marry them," guessed Samantha. "Exactly," said Nanny Piggins. "Once it's happened to someone in your family, you know to be on the lookout for this sort of thing. So what do you say?" "About what?" asked Samantha. "Would you mind terribly if I went down to your school and broke in so I could check the lost property box myself? I shan't get a wink of sleep if I don't." "Well, I suppose we wouldn't want you to miss out on a night's sleep," said Samantha. And that is what they did. Nanny Piggins, Boris and the children borrowed Mr. Green's Rolls-Royce and drove down to the school, where, after jimmying open a lock and hot-wiring the alarm system, they soon found Samantha's jumper, and they all lived happily ever after, without ascending to heaven. At least, not that day. The end. Well, there you go. I made it through. There was a bit of a thunder and rumbling like that about, but I did make it through, so I'm very pleased to have done that. All right, well, that's it for this week. I am doing an event in Sydney on Saturday. I think it's the 1st. The first weekend in February of 2025. It's Saturday from 10 until 12. There's going to be a big event at Dimmicks in Sydney, the George Street Dimmicks. They're reopening the children's department, which is down in the basement level of that store. They've completely renovated it, so they're having a big reopening event, and there's going to be me and my author friend Jackie Harvey are both going to be doing presentations, and there's going to be a couple of illustrators, I think, doing illustrator battle, or maybe they're doing illustrator presentations. I'm not really sure. I'm not in charge. All I know is I have been asked to go and be a part of that. So there's probably a half hour somewhere between 10 and 12 where I will be in full flight doing a performance there. So if you're interested in coming along to Dimmicks on Saturday, you will find me there, and I'll be able to sign books for you and that sort of thing. You can check it out online. If you look it up through my Instagram page or through the Dimmicks George Street Instagram or Facebook, there's details on how to register for the event. All right. Well, that's it for now. It's good to be back home. It's good to be back telling you stories again. And until next time, goodbye. Hello, it's me again. If you enjoyed listening to Bedtime Stories with R.A. Spratt, it would be really helpful if you could like, subscribe, follow, and or review the show on whatever podcast platform you're listening to now. Every little one of those digital affirmations helps, and the bigger this podcast gets, the more I can justify procrastinating from my real job to keep bringing these stories to you. Thank you.